Tim Dickinson.
Here.
Councilmember Fahey.
Here.
Mayor Lay.
Here.
Councilmember Cooperman.
Here.
Councilmember Hoffner. Councilmember Hamilton.
Here.
Councilmember Kern.
All right. Can you join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. I'm presuming that we don't have council members online, correct? I think. Good. Okay, the next part of our meeting is public comments on items not on the agenda and on items. The next part is public comments on items not on the agenda or items on the consent agenda. If you would like to speak, and we invite you to do that, come up to the clerk with a little form filled out so you know who you are, and she'll call your name one at a time when it's time to speak. Those forms are right outside of the council chambers. If you decide to come up and speak, make sure you say your name and the city where you're from. You don't have to give your address. And you can speak for up to 3 minutes, 6 minutes if you pool your time with somebody who can be identified either here or online as somebody who's wanting to pool their time with you. We ask others in the gallery tonight not to clap or boo or hiss, simply because it makes it harder for people who have never done this or don't do it very often to concentrate, and frankly, it may deter people from coming up and giving their comments. We want to encourage people as widely as possible to give comments to the public at this time. So do we have any folks who want to comment during public comment? No? Okay. Seeing none, the consent agenda is the next item on our agenda. Do we have a motion on the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Good. Right, the next part of the agenda is council information, comments, and committee reports. We're getting a little bit of echo? We're good? Okay. Any council reports this evening? Okay. I have a couple of comments. One is, I think I can encourage the city manager to relay what the hours of closing of our facilities are next week. But it's our last meeting of the year. So it'll be next year before we meet. Been a good year. And happy holidays to all of you. A couple of other things. One is that I wanted to call out one person, Kathy Karande, who has run Dance Front for the last 6 years. She is an extraordinary teacher and an extraordinary dancer with a very long and amazing career of her own. She is going to be stepping away from Dance Front. I believe she has sold it, and I have no doubt that she will remain probably involved maybe as a participant. But I think when we when we have somebody who's been as much of a jewel to certain people in the city, maybe not others that know her, but she's just been a pillar of this community on the arts. And I can't say enough about her, but I wanted to say something here. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to say is we had a meeting of the Louisville Revitalization Commission last week. That was my last meeting because I've served on it for 5 years. And as long as we have a positive vote tonight, Mayor Pro Tem Dickinson is going to serve on the LRC representing the council. Wanted to just share about that meeting. I think it's fairly clear that everybody is having challenges with their budgets, and wanted to just emphasize a little bit that the LRC is going to be supporting with bond proceeds, the Downtown Vision Plan, and that's going to do some pretty amazing things for partly Front Street and some on Main Street too. It's a big commitment that they're making and that they've decided on. So there are a lot of things that have yet to be worked out. But with this body, with council, we had a meeting previously, as we have with many of the boards and commissions. We're going to do that again. I'm hoping we do that like Q1 in the new year so that we can work even more tightly together, because that what the LRC is doing there is very important to us, making it smooth for the businesses that are downtown to weather the challenges of having construction right in the middle is really important. But we welcomed the Mayor Pro Tem to the LRC on last Wednesday, and I must say I'm not going to miss having to get up after a council meeting on Tuesday to attend a LRC meeting, but I know that Mayor Pro Tem will be doing that with relish. So that's all I have. Any other comments? Please.
I have one just briefly. I've noticed that construction has begun, or demolition, I guess, on Enclave Park. And I am happy to see that the whole process is moving forward and they've gotten a lot done already. So thank you very much.
One final thing that I forgot. The senior lunch was last week. Really fun event every year, hugely well attended. There were almost, I think, 160 people plus there. Not quite as well attended as the Thanksgiving feast, which I think was 200, but Councilmember Fahey was there, Lygia, who's in the city manager's office, was there, and others, and huge turnout from staff, including Adam was there, serving up stuff. And anyway, that's a really cool event. Yet another one of those kind of signature events that makes Louisville. So that's it. All right. So the next is the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll confirm those closures for us. Library and City Hall are closed on 12/24 as well as 12/25, and the Rec Center is also closed on 12/25. Library and City Hall are closed on the first of the year, though I believe the Rec Center is open if you'd like to start your year with a fitness class. I do want to take a moment to highlight some good work that our city has done. So those of us following insurance renewals know that while they might be a boring topic, they're not always an easy topic. This organization has done a lot of work on safety to reduce our mod for workers' comp and implement procedures that help us get a better rate on insurance. And we've actually gotten a better rate than anticipated in our budget. So this is really great insurance renewal news. Council will be seeing information on that coming up. And then I just want to take the moment to thank council and everyone here. This is our last council meeting of 2024.
Are you going to go over any other accomplishments right now? or soon?
We have a presentation later this
Okay.
meeting where I'll talk about more accomplishments.
I just want to say thank you to all the staff in every part of the organization because it has been, for many reasons, budget and otherwise, an incredibly difficult year. You've got a very difficult mayor who's just can be anyway. Geez, tough crowd. Wow. I would have thought that would have gotten somebody going. Anyway, you've got, I think, a council that is very active and involved. I think you've got residents in the city that are very involved watching what we're doing and being interested in what we're doing. And in addition, we're going to get to this in a little bit, applying in greater numbers than ever for boards and commissions, which just astounds me every year. But an even bigger showing of incredibly talented people from our community who are willing to give their time to make this city even better. One other thing I want to mention is trying to remember the slides from Chamber of Commerce in there. I gave a presentation a few weeks ago to the Chamber of Commerce, which was state of the city. The slides are in there, and they do cover a lot of what has been done this year, accomplishments. Those are accomplishments of the council, all the people on both sides, staff, and with support from the residents. And I think we can all be very, very proud of that list. And we look forward to moving forward next year with a good list that we're going to be preparing. I want to, I guess, recognize a couple of aspects of that. There's the sheer volume of items that we accomplished is really pretty tremendous, having gone over that and just ticked them off. The pivots that our staff had to make under, now 2 new councils since then. And that, I think, speaks incredibly well to the nimbleness of the staff. Because sometimes we forget that when we change direction, and we did, staff's got to change direction too. And there's not this sort of sitting back and resisting and so forth. They're doing that. That's their job at some level, but they did their job with a great deal of grace and ingenuity, despite having a lot of things that were unusual that happened this year. And then finally, the sheer breadth of these policy areas where we made shifts in means that it wasn't just one person on the senior team. It was all of the people who lead the organization, and it is a testament to leadership from all of them, especially on budget, but not only on budget, and a testament to our city manager. And I'm leaving the preliminary title off. I really appreciate her and our deputy city manager who are filling in right now and doing a marvelous job. So I guess I would suggest that we on council give them a hand. All right. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the American Public Works Association Award presentation.
Good evening, Mayor. We have Chuck Weiss here tonight from the American Public Works Association to present an award for Safe Streets.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. So every year, the local Colorado chapter of the APWA receives nominations for improvement projects across the state. The city had submitted a application here for the project Louisville's Unconventional Countermeasures Creating Safer Streets. This was in the category of operations and maintenance for a community size of 25,000 or less. And I'm here to tell you that congratulations, you won the award this year. So I just wanted to give a brief overview of the project and present the plaque. So just in general here, the city overcame initial community resistance to quickly respond to safety issues by successfully implementing 2 different unconventional roadway countermeasures to improve safety and increase mobility for road users in 2 different neighborhoods. Within a year of being restriped, the first roadway experienced 2 vehicle pedestrian injury crashes at an intersection that already included standard calming resources. These incidents sparked immense outcry for swift improvements. This road created a bit of a unique challenge as it was a collector with on-street parking with houses along the roadway, but wasn't wide enough for specific bike lanes. The street receives minimal parking, so bicyclists rode in an open parking lane until reaching a bump out or a parked car that made it unpredictable movements into the flow of traffic to get around obstacles. After conducting traffic studies and examining studies from other cities, it was determined that this corridor met the traffic volume, speed, and usage requirements for installing an unconventional trial treatment called advisory bike lanes. The ABLs accommodate 2-way motor vehicle traffic operation within a single lane when bicyclists are present. Implemented in both directions, a common 12-foot wide driving area is created down the middle with a 5-foot wide dashed area to provide an advisory lane. The bike lane overlaps the motor vehicle travel area, where it is expected motorists will regularly encounter meeting or passing situations. Opposing conflicting traffic pauses in the parking lane until there's sufficient width to pass. Implemented in conjunction with other safety measures, the community is realizing the area has become safer to slower traffic, providing pedestrians and cyclists proper space and visibility to maneuver. The second safety improvement project involved performing a road diet on a main arterial, reducing travelway from 4 lanes to 2. The proposed changes were initially discussed when our transportation master plan recommended a street that could benefit from some turn lanes removals and striping reconfiguration. This initial street is unique as it is due to it's an arterial divider with 2 neighborhoods, no commercial or industrial uses on either side, splitting 2 major residential sections of town. This created a barrier between the 2 neighborhoods where families didn't feel safe crossing and speeds in excess of posted speed limits deterred cyclists from using the roadway. Improving safety along this corridor became a priority, but it wasn't without hurdles. With traffic volumes of over 9,000 vehicles per day, staff felt confident of this stretch was a prime candidate for a road diet. We were surprised to receive extreme pushback from the community as there was a disconnect with travelers not understanding how the new traffic plan could be successful. Despite traffic counts and speed studies, there were concerns on the side streets that they would back up and not being able to make left turns, affecting evacuation times, flows, especially after the Marshall Fire proved this roadway is a strong evacuation route. Striping was designated to take route down to 1 lane in each direction, with some of the old through lanes repurposed for acceleration lanes and left turn pockets, strategically leaving out left turns in certain areas. Striping work included crosswalks, bike symbols, turn arrows, etc. The new roadway configuration is working great, and traffic appears to be slower. Overcoming strong public doubt and receiving city approval was one of our greatest achievements, and community support is increasing. We feel very strong that our countermeasures will improve efficiencies along these corridors. Both striping reconfigurations projects were controversial solutions initially, but took extra effort to win over public support. After rollout, we've received a lot of positive feedback from the community throughout and continue to see improvement. Both areas appear to be successful thoroughfares, presenting good results and improved mobility with increased storage. So just in summary, remaining resolute to couple unique experimental procedures with traditional safety countermeasures for the betterment of our community was found to minimize the negative effects of vehicular travel and improve safety and mobility for all roadway users. Initially, controversial road design solutions have achieved their goal of reducing risk and injuries while enhancing livability and accessibility. Success in winning over public support and for understanding of our unconventional experimental roadway treatments, such as advisory bike lanes and road diets, has spurred pride in city staff for their service for meeting the community needs. So with that, congratulations on behalf of the American Public Works Association.
Thank you. Do you want to
Got a
present the
plaque here
award?
we can present whether.
Please, please.
Where do you want us here? Right here? Up to you.
By the way, that, for those who don't know him, that's Kurt Coards, our Director of Public Works. Thank you very much. I think our next sub-item is the Law Enforcement Appreciation Day proclamation, and I'll read that. And maybe ask the Chief, Rafael Gutierrez, to come up during that if you want. And frankly, it looks like you've got some supporters and hopefully supported folks, supported by me.
Yes,
and the
Mayor, we
rest.
do. So I've invited the shift that's working tonight to come and listen to this proclamation directly. A lot of times I pass on the words of appreciation that are given to me to them, but I think it's important for them to understand the support of council and the great community that we have. So like I said, I've invited those that work day in and day out to ensure our cities and community safety. And like I said, I felt like it was important for them to hear this as well.
Okay, well, before I read it, I know that one of the things that we appreciate about living here in a relatively small town is that the bedrock of that is public safety and a safe place for us to go, for animals to go, and for our kids to grow up. And really appreciate the work. But let's, I'll read the proclamation here. National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day proclamation. Whereas National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day was founded in 2015 to recognize officers across the country for the daily sacrifices they make for their communities. And whereas National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day is observed on Thursday, January 9th, 2025, and observants of the day are encouraged to support law enforcement officers by wearing blue and turning on blue lights at their homes. And whereas the health and safety of the residents, visitors, and businesses of the city of Louisville, Colorado are important to the quality of life in our community, and whereas the city of Louisville, Colorado is the proud home of dedicated law enforcement officers who put their lives on the line to keep our community safe. And whereas we appreciate the extraordinary efforts and sacrifices made by law enforcement officers and their family members on a daily basis in order to protect our homes, workplaces, roadways, and places of recreation, and whereas the well-being of the city of Louisville, Colorado residents is preserved and enhanced as a direct result of the vigilance of law enforcement officers now, therefore, the city of Louisville, Colorado declares the recognition of National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day on January 9th, 2025, dated this 17th day of December, 2024. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Chief, and thanks to the entire force for your support of the city. Pardon me? Yes, that would be a good idea. We're going to take a couple of minute break, just to come and shake hands. We appreciate our officers, but we got to get back to work. Come on. I can. Josh? Josh? Thanks. All right, ordinance number 1876, series 2024, an ordinance amending chapter 15.18.030 of the Louisville Municipal Code concerning the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code, first reading, to set the public hearing on January 21st, 2025. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The next item on the agenda is open space management update. I think we have a staff presentation from Adam Blackmore.
I feel like I can go home happy now. That was a big deal. There was a whole rehearsal for that. Very good. All right, good evening, Mayor, City Council. Adam Blackmore, I'm the Director of Parks, Rec, and Open Space for the City of Louisville. Tonight I'm here with staff to provide an update to your 2024 work plan item related to the administration and management of our Open Space Division and the progress that we've made over the past couple of years that I've been with the city as the division continues to transition through revised funding and staffing formulas. While there's a significant amount of impressive work and history through the nearly 20 years since the first open space only employee was hired, so we are still pretty young division, tonight's presentation will primarily focus on 2024 accomplishments, operations, and beyond. This City Council work plan item was added as a reminder on the heels of a number of large-scale planning and operations best practices from 2023. These included the Parks General Maintenance and Asset Management Plan that was accepted by City Council in early 2023, and there was a request at that time for a similar overview and asset discussion regarding the Open Space Division also be brought forth between the dais in 2024. There's also, this is on the heels of recommendations from the Wildfire Risk Assessment, more commonly known as the WRA, and the passing of Ballot Measure 2C, which extended parks and increased open space, sales, and use tax funding for the next 10 years. As you will see in tonight's presentation, over the past couple of years, this relatively small but extremely talented open space team has accomplished much in the ways of implementing new organizational structures, project management completion, outlining a long-term planning vision, and enhancing the protection and management of our open space natural resources. Providing you with the presentation tonight will be Open Space Superintendent Ember Brignall, and then we'll be around to answer any questions.
Thank you, Council, for being here tonight and your interest in learning more about open space. As Director Blackmore said, I'm Ember Brignall. I'm the Open Space Superintendent here at the City of Louisville. And in this presentation tonight, we're going to go over a high-level overview of what open space is, as well as covering some tasks we accomplished in 2024 and where we're going in 2025. And since I keep hearing this is the last meeting for you of 2024, I'm going to challenge you right now to think, what does open space mean to you? If you had to pick one word to describe open space, what would that word be? And I'm guessing, as the leaders of the community sitting at the dais tonight, you might all have different words, and some of those might be competing demands with one another. When we ask citizens the same questions, we get a full range of answers. Everything from trails and biking, really focused on recreation, to pollinators, biodiversity, really focusing on conservation. So again, a lot of competing demands. But the one thing all of our citizens agree on is that they love open space. They feel like open space is one of the networks that makes Louisville what it is. And not only that, but one of the fun facts from the 2024 community survey, not only do they love us, but overall performance of the open space division was satisfactory of 91%. Of the 91% that said open space division performance was satisfactory, half of those said they're actually excellent. So I just wanted to share that with you all. Now, I asked you to think of one word. We were unable to do that. That's my joke for tonight. We couldn't think of just one word to describe open space, so we really rely on the Home Rule Charter to help us define the goals and mission and vision of open space. So as you can see in our mission statement, our primary goals are really to acquire and manage land to protect it for natural and cultural resources, while also providing opportunities for education, volunteering, and appropriate passive recreation. So as you can see, this timeline demonstrates just how we follow those mission and vision statements. We started land acquisition in the late 70s. Some of that was fee simple acquisition. Some of that was land dedicated to the city through the development process. And then in 1992, we developed a Parks Master Plan. And you might be saying, if you're following along, that's not on the PowerPoint, and you're here to talk about open space. But the reason I bring up the Parks Master Plan is during that process, there was another citizen survey asking the community to prioritize what they wanted to see done in Louisville. And one of those things was to protect open space. In the next year, 1993, you see the first open space sales tax was adopted and supported by the community. And if you keep following the timeline, there's a lot of support, there's board work, there's property acquisition, but it's not until 2006 that we saw our first dedicated open space employee. So we are, as Director Blackmore said, a pretty young program both in the city and in the Front Range. After staff was hired, we worked hard. In 2007, we established the education program for the open space division. In 2016, we decided, hey, let's add a ranger program. So we did that. In 2019, we added staffing to our natural resource program to really bring focus to solid science and make sure we have a strong foundation for the work we're doing and to continue to do really good science-based work. And we just keep going. Currently, we have 29 open space properties in our portfolio. 17 are city-owned and city-managed properties. An additional 12 properties are jointly owned. As you know, some of those ownership partnerships are with Boulder County Parks and Open Space and Lafayette Open Space. We manage an open space over 25 miles of the 32-mile trail system network here in Louisville. So 25 miles maintained specifically by the open space team. And we now have 9 full-time employees working for open space, which is a far cry from that one way back when. So currently, this is how our division is organized. We have 3 main work groups. So in green, you can see the natural resource team, which has 2 full-time employees and 2 seasonals. In blue, you can see our ranger team, which has 2 employees. And then in orange on the right, you can see our trails and maintenance team, which currently has 3 full-time employees and 2 seasonals. And one thing I really want to point out in this slide is because of the successful funding of the 2C ballot measure, we did add 2 new full-time employees this year. One's been here for 4.5 months. The 2 positions hired one was our maintenance technician 1, really wanting to bring focus back to maintaining what we have and making sure we're doing a great job with that. The other new position that's been here for 4 months now I'm excited about is our open space manager. And that position's really aimed at looking into the future, making sure we're still maintaining solid science-based work and that our work is in alignment with both community and council goals. Of these 3 work groups, we all work together very closely. One of the primary focuses this year was on natural resource and fire mitigation. So as you may recall, we came to City Council last October with the Wildfire Risk Assessment Report. And if you remember, that report outlined multiple tasks, first, second, and third priority tasks that should be completed to reduce fire mitigation concerns in Louisville. Of the assignments assigned to open space, we have, in under a year, completed 86% of that work. We have completed 100% of the first priority projects. So that was a big add to our program, a big commitment of staff. And while I say it's complete, I just want to add that some of these are one-time projects. So you can see removal of shrubs and trees along property lines, pretty much a one-time deal. Removal of downed woody material, that was Siberian elm removal at North Open Space this year, also one time. But everything else on this list is going to be continuous annual work. So that is something that we are challenged to add to the work plan every year from here on out. So we're excited to be doing that work. Obviously, we have grazing that you've heard a lot about. We do a lot of area mowing and perimeter mowing. We're working on restoration and conversion of smooth brome to have more native composition, which has lower flammability, and native seed collection. With that ongoing work, I also want to share that since we started contractual mowing and grazing, it's been fully funded through grants. So the city hasn't taken on the burden of that cost. We're completely grant funded for those two operations since we started them through 2007, at which point we'll apply for some more grants. But right now, we're feeling really good that those are financially covered. If you're interested in more natural resource fire mitigation work, I would encourage you to follow this link below to go to our Louisville story map. It outlines a lot of our fun numbers of what we're doing. If you're a curious citizen, I encourage you to check it out. You can type in your home address and zoom right into your neighborhood and see polygons of what's happening near you. Is it trail mowing? Is it area mowing? Is it 2 acres? Is it 10 acres? All of that information is right there and updated every season with our work. The other thing you will see on our story map is more fun numbers about our grazing program. So thanks to the marketing team, we have this really fun display to show you tonight. And what we want to point out is the grazing that we accomplished this year alone, just in 2024, is the equivalent of over 111 football fields. And if you were to measure that, you would find, and we did, we clipped and measured the weight of grasses, you would find that we removed over 17,000 pounds of fuels from the open space system in 1 year, which happens to be the weight of 5 Subarus, because we are in Colorado. So we are removing a lot of fuel from the system, but one of the reasons we're really excited about the grazing program in open space and what we're doing different in Louisville open space is grazing is not just used as a fire mitigation tool. It is really used to implement natural resource management. So our goal is really to combine fuel reduction with best management practice, and that's been something our team's been working really hard on. So what you see over time is if you have a monoculture of smooth brome, fire can spread quickly in that stand because it's a sod-forming carpet of grass. As you start to convert those species into native species, our native species are typically more bunch grasses. So you'll have a grass with soil, grass, soil. And that changes the dynamic of how fire moves through the system. So not only are we reducing fire, but we're actually improving our habitat. And that's really important to us. We don't want to overgraze. We want to find that right balance that meets both goals, which is one of the things open space is always striving to do. And clearly, to me anyway, we do not work on this alone. In the open space program, we are really proud to have all of the following partners. And when I say partners, I don't mean a one-off email. I mean true collaboration with sit-down meetings, strategies, report writing, information sharing. So some that I've highlighted on the slide tonight are our work really focusing on grazing. So we worked with the NRCS and the Longmont and Boulder Valley Conservation Districts to understand what utilization rates we wanted to target for grazing. So we know for fire, you want to hit that 50% utilization. What do you want to hit for natural resource management? How do you find that? And just because you know what you're going for, how do you actually find out if you achieved it? So we also worked at that with them to look at sampling strategies so we can quantify the work we're doing and make sure we're hitting those target goals. And then, of course, if you do grazing, everything in open space is a circle. So if you do grazing, you're going to impact birds. So, of course, we had to work with the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies So we're working with them to find out how to graze to increase habitat for our avian community. So what we're finding is if you graze in a certain mosaic, you're going to have more diversity in your grasses in the future and what grows at different heights, which brings in more bird species. So again, how do we make natural resource happen on the land? The other program we're excited to be working with is CU Boulder. We're working with a postdoctorate there who's working with organizations along the Front Range, City of Boulder, Boulder County, Jefferson County, Superior, us, to research study plots to look at what different fire mitigation treatments do and how they impact fire. So that's an exciting one for us. And one thing I'm always telling my team is good partnership really needs to go two ways. So we're not only learning and collaborating, we're actually leading a lot of efforts as Louisville Open Space. So some other symbols up here tonight, we have the Colorado Open Space Alliance. Our rangers presented 2 presentations at that conference this year. One was to talk about how body cameras can be used to improve a ranger program. The other was to talk about how education can be incorporated in a ranger program. And if you look at the Ranger Excellence School, our rangers also develop curriculum for the annual Ranger Training Seminar. So that's pretty exciting. And our natural resource team has co-authored on some fire fact sheets with Colorado State Forest Service. And we were also asked to present at the Boulder County Fireshed Grassland Conference with other national leaders. So we are really stepping up to the table. I'm proud of our team. I think the city is proud of our team. We are the leaders in grassland management at this point for fire, and a lot of people are looking to us to see what we're doing, how we're doing it, how we're achieving it. And that's pretty exciting for our team to be engaged in. Changing gears a little bit, I'm going to shift to our Ranger program. Rangers exemplify our mission and vision statement. They're boots on the ground, connecting with the community, inspiring the community about why open space is important, and why stewardship is important. We only have 2 rangers in our program, yet they made over 9,000 contacts this year alone. A lot of those contacts, 8,000, are friendly ambassador style contacts. So it's really that meet and greet on the trail system when someone asks, what's that flower? When are you doing this program? And that's really how our program started. We wanted the rangers to be friendly ambassadors to support the community and kind of spread the vision of what open space means. If you break these numbers down a little bit further and look at all the white circles, you'll see the other contacts. We have 573, our first responder and law enforcement contacts. So that could be anything from dispatch calling to have rangers support with a road hazard, traffic assistance. It could be working with Colorado Parks, State and Wildlife. It could be boat license checks. It could be a resident assist, which surprisingly, we lose a lot of cell phones and grates in this community, and the rangers like to fish them out. So we even track those. So with all of those, we get down to 250 enforcement actions that would result in a written warning or a citation. So again, this just goes to show we are trying to lead with education first and protection when it's necessary for human safety or resource protection. Rangers are also involved in encroachment monitoring, access use permits. You can see the patrol miles. We just purchased through donation, as you all know, 2 new e-bikes for the Rangers this year, so we expect those bike patrol miles to increase for 2025. And of course, Rangers are vital in our education and outreach program. So for education and outreach, we don't have staff dedicated to these roles. This is one of those programs that back in the day we thought was important to add to the city so every staff member chips in. Rangers have the bulk of that, managing about 50% of our programs. So this year in Open Space, we hosted 51 programs. We had over 1,500 in attendance. And we really have a wide variety of programs, everything from astronomy to bird walks, to nature detectives, to crafts and arts. So it's really, in our opinion, open space really should be for everyone. So we try to get programs that bring different user groups out that might not normally be in our system. So the painters, the astrologers, we try to get everyone involved. One of our initiatives this year, which supported the city's EDI initiative, was the adaptive bike opportunity. So in the photo in the slide, that's Jake, our trails technician, who hosted the program in collaboration with the City of Boulder Open Space and Mountain Parks in Louisville. Highly attended program, highly appreciated. So we'll continue with our programs. We also have a volunteer program, over 1,300 hours contributed. We have a lot of single-day events, and we also host some multi-day programs. So Adopt Open Space, Raptor Monitors, Weed Whackers, those are groups that commit to us for the whole field season. We train them plant ID, bird ID, and they're really going out there on our behalf like extra staff members doing work with us and for the community. So for the volunteer nest, I wanted to share, we had volunteers monitoring 18 nests, and they tracked that 36 chicks fledged this year in Louisville. So that's really work that it's hard for staff to squeeze in, and having those volunteers support us goes a really long way. It also goes back into the vision and mission. As you all know, anytime you can engage the community, you're building stewards for the future. And one of our main goals is to make sure we have open space in the future and it's respected and appreciated by future generations. This slide, I need to give a lot of kudos to our marketings team. We do a lot of what I call passive education. So we don't necessarily always have one of our 9 staff members in the field to talk to citizens, but we certainly have an educational sign. You can see the blue one speaking about grazing and why we're doing it. What dates are we going to be here? We have letters that go home to the citizens saying, grazing is coming. It's coming in a week. It's coming in 2 days. Here it is. We have campaigns to clean up dog waste. We have bird checklists, which you have in your goodie bag today. We really try to, again, reach every person we can from any angle that we can. And we have a lot of success through this, and really encourage you, if you're not part of the Fans of Louisville Open Space page yet, you should consider joining tonight. Obviously, we can't fit everything into this presentation, so this is a little bit of a catch-all slide, really covering other work that we do every single year, day in and day out. Noxious weed control, obviously very important to our community. Wildlife monitoring, restoration. We restored 7 acres that we seeded in-house with new equipment this year, so that was exciting for us. Trails and maintenance are the bread and butter of the program and what a lot of citizens see and appreciate. Tidy trailheads, parking lots. If you go to Aquarius this year, it was in top condition all year long. We also mow 121 miles of trail edge, which would be the equivalent of you driving from Louisville to Lander, Wyoming at 3 miles per hour. So think about that next time you are on a road trip. Obviously, we have a lot of big numbers here: trash cans, snow removal, vault restroom. A pilot program that we started this year was a human dimension study to track use at Davidson Mesa. So one thing we're really excited to look at is who's using our properties, what time of day are they using our properties, which properties are most popular. This can really help us guide future management, decide when to do contracts that have the least impact on our community, et cetera. So we're excited to see how that unfolds. We also work with, of course, the Open Space Youth Corps is really important to our mission, and Bridge House Ready to Work. We're getting really close, guys. So sales and use tax, we just wanted to put this slide up really to thank you for all of the work you did on getting the tax passed. The money supported these extra projects. So these were not in our work plan at the beginning of the year, but with the new funds, we added them with the wildfire mitigation. So we had a focus on Hecla, where we did wildlife habitat fencing to protect shorebirds, restoration, plantings. We started our vegetation transects this year. So knowing we have a trails master plan coming up in 2025, we went ahead and did vegetation surveys in all of our known future trail locations so that we're ahead of the curve and that material can influence the upcoming trail master plan. The rest of the surveys will be completed citywide in 2025. We hired the 2 new positions that I mentioned earlier and the restoration equipment that I mentioned. So again, looking forward to 2025. As you know, capital projects approved are going to keep our division and our department busy this year. They'll also be exciting to get new input from the community about how they feel about open space and what they want to see moving forward. So we'll be working on the PROS long range plan, the trail master plan, completing vegetation citywide. We've done vegetation surveys in the past, so this not only will be a new baseline in some areas, but a great comparison to show how the landscape is changing with our management efforts to see if we have more native composition, fewer weeds, more biodiversity, etc. Hecla Trail resurfacing is on the list, parking lot maintenance is on the list, sign upgrades are on the list. And then we have our regular operational projects as well. So of course, we'll continue with our grazing, mowing, restoration, weed control, supporting council in any needs for establishing an acquisition policy, and the usual projects. So I do want to thank you for your attention tonight. We are going to attempt to show you a very short video that our marketing team put together that really just shows what can be done with council support, community support, and a lot of teamwork. So I'm going to try this. Technology is not always my friend. Oh, it's looking good. So this is just a short clip of the variety of things that we do in open space. So with that, we just like to say open space is an experience, not a bunch of words. So come out and join us on the trails, and Director Blackmore and I are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a comprehensive presentation. Council members, do you have comments? Well, not comments yet. Questions for staff? Yes. Councilmember Fahey.
I want to first thank staff for the wonderful job that you're doing in maintaining all of our open space and trails. My question is regarding the ditches, the Louisville lateral along Davidson Mesa, and also the one just south of the reservoir, up north of South Boulder Road. Are those cleaned out, or do you have any plans to clean them out, and how are you going to do it? I've talked with a couple of people, and they say that a controlled burn through the ditch is the cheapest and fastest way to do it. But there's also manual ways that take more time and more staff time. So just my question.
So that's a great question. Obviously, ditches are pretty complicated in the city of Louisville. Some fall to our maintenance and ownership, and some do not. So our goal is to work with Public Works as well as the ditch companies to get a better understanding of that mix and how we can support each other moving forward. While burns are a fast, effective, affordable way, I would say that is a community decision in Louisville that still needs to be made to look at how best to implement control. And what we're looking at, since we don't have ownership of all the ditches, we're really looking at strategies to create fuel breaks and fire breaks between ditches and homes to control the way fire moves in that way. So we're really focusing our efforts right now on the land management adjacent to ditches, but in collaboration with other departments, we hope to make more progress in ditch maintenance countywide.
an add-on to that, excuse me, the Boulder County Mountain Parks and Open Space recently, using 1A funding, were able to get a position specifically related to ditch management throughout the county. And it's a recent addition to their team. And so through discussions with my counterpart in that very large department, I've been given assurance that they're serving as a liaison with the litany of ditch companies throughout the county, that Louisville will be able to take advantage of that moving forward. So to be determined what that looks like, but those conversations are happening.
Okay, my main concern is the concerns that I've heard from neighbors that live right along the Louisville lateral up on the mesa. And some people think that that's how the fire got through Louisville, was burning through the ditch and all the stuff that was in there. So I'm just wondering if there's any way to, for that one in particular, to get cleaned out.
I think I've probably had the same conversations. It's not in our purview to do the maintenance. It's an encroachment into the ditch company's management strategy. So we won't be actually conducting the maintenance, but we'll certainly be relaying that. And Corey, our Deputy Director of Utilities, is our primary ditch contact, and everyone is in the loop with that particular ditch, and we'll be coordinating with the ditch company to try to get a better response on future management of that for maintenance.
So I was under the impression that the Louisville lateral was owned and controlled by the city.
Well, we can look at exactly which ditch you're talking about, but if we're talking about the one on the west side, what would that be?
The west side of Enclave neighborhood.
Yeah, then I think the actual ditch itself does not fall under our purview for maintenance. So, but we can certainly talk offline about it and make sure that I'm accurate too.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Anyone else? Yes, Councilmember Cooperman.
Thank you very much for the great presentation. I have a few little questions. I was curious, do we know how much of our open space is used as agricultural land?
So of our city open space, the only agriculture that's being done is grazing through the city, and on our jointly owned lands, the majority are under agricultural management.
Okay. And like very roughly speaking, like what proportion of the acreage is jointly owned, and what was that?
So we have over 600 acres are city-owned, and over 1,200-ish are in the jointly ownership category, and we can look up additional information for you on specific ag acres on jointly owned lands if you're interested.
I just was looking for kind of a ballpark, so that's helpful. I was also wondering, especially with those new e-bikes, are your rangers engaging in e-bike education and enforcement, or to some extent, or?
So our rangers have recently gone through the police department's training that was held for e-bike training. So they are educated, and we're hoping that they are leading by example when they're on their bikes, reducing their speeds, being careful about corners. We have been participating in e-bike education through passive education. We did multiple booths this summer to talk about e-bike use and hazards. We also created slow down zones throughout the city at key intersections. So we're looking at multiple different ways to approach it, but mainly we are trying to educate the community that it's really about the behavior of the biker, not the equipment itself. So we do have some campaigns from the past that we could bring back this year as well for trail etiquette. That was a big campaign we did a couple years ago. So hopefully we can bring that back and help support education on e-bikes.
Okay. And then you mentioned briefly the smooth brome conversion program. Could you just say a little bit more about that? I've heard that you're doing some testing of pesticides to control smooth brome, and I'm just like to know a little bit more about that program.
Yeah, certainly. And we have a report we could share with you as well. But our smooth brome study plots are located at North Open Space. So we have a variety of plots to test a variety of methods. So they include using grazing, varying grazing utilization rates. So I think we have a 60% grazing rate, a 90% grazing rate. We have a mowing unit. We have an herbicide unit. We have a mowing plus herbicide unit. We have a whole combination of study plots that we're doing work twice a year to see if it can be converted. We do know through working with our partners that it is very challenging to convert smooth brome without herbicides. So that is why we are including an herbicide plot. We are reaching out for support to look at potentially using glyphosate as a future plot, since we know that is effective in smooth brome. And we're also looking at herbicide selection, additional herbicide selection. But what we're finding is actually the glyphosate is a safer chemical to use near waterways. So we're still investigating the herbicide component. Right now, we have approval for the other plots, which is really focused on the grazing and mowing strategies. Part of the study with CU also is looking at prescribed fire for a unit, so that is something we'd be interested in exploring in the future as well. This was the first year of our study, so we're assuming it will take a couple years. Land management and open space is always a long process when you're looking to convert a species. So we'll be tracking that for several years and hopefully adding other strategies as new science becomes available as well.
Great. I could ask a couple more, if that's all right. Let's see. So you also mentioned restoration work at Hecla Lake. I guess right, when the city did that water pipeline work, I think it cut through the property. And I don't know, I've heard some feedback around some of the reseeding having not fully taken maybe. I'm just wondering about the status of that, and if with the trail being redone, if there's going to be some more work to see that we get rid of the scar or as much as we can.
So I would say our restoration was really successful in that all restoration takes about 5 to 7 years in open space. So restoring grasslands without water is a tall task in this arid environment. So we have reseeded multiple times. We actually just reseeded in advance of this recent precipitation this year. So we're hoping, now that we've taken that operation in-house, we're hoping to see more success next year. But we did use our open space native seed mix and restored, or at least reseeded the pipeline area. We'll visit it again in the spring and look at interseeding again. And we also did some pollinator plantings and pocket prairies on the far corner of Hecla as well.
Okay. Sorry. I'm also curious, do you have any sense for sort of the process for establishing the acquisition policy?
I'm going to hand that question to our director.
Yeah. So a bit TBD, a bit driven by our new city manager and by city council. Where we had gotten in the process with that was we'll call it a first draft from City Manager Durbin to the Open Space Advisory Board, asking for feedback. It was very heavy with city manager involvement in that process to try to expedite some of the available properties as they would go along. It was heavy in city council review of condition assessment of properties. There was some discussion about the frequency of evaluating prospective potential properties, creating relationships with current owners who may want to sell in the future. So it's all a long-winded way of saying that we've asked the Open Space Advisory Board, and they have provided feedback on that idea. But if we still anticipate that it's going to be a heavily driven city manager process moving forward, and so it'll be something within the first few months of that person coming on board that we hope to tackle. It's on Open Space Advisory Board's work plan for next year. It'll be great now that we have the account set up to buy things, to formalize the process for how we would go about doing that a little more efficiently than we have in the past.
Okay. And just one last question. With regards to the vegetation transects, I assume you don't just look at the vegetation, but you also look at the wildlife that's living there when you do the transects. And I was curious, do you think those surveys are sufficient to have a good sense for what the ecology is like before we put in a trail?
So typically when we do our vegetation surveys, they are focused, they're by botanists, they're specifically focused on the vegetation, not the surrounding wildlife in this case. So they go through looking at species diversity, species composition, species density, and it really gives us the first overview, sort of an indicator of health in the system. And then if we find areas where we're seeing high numbers of native species or any threatened species or rare plants, then we would come back and do an additional, more thorough inventory based on the alignment of the trail. And that's when we start to really work on, maybe we need to move where the trail goes, maybe we need to shift here or there. So the details really come, that's sort of the first red flag, and then the details come together when we have trail alignment and vegetation happening at the same time.
If I could just real quick add on that. There was the method to the madness with doing the vegetation survey prior to doing the Trails Master Plan was to have that information as a supplemental document as we went through the Trails Master Planning process with environmentalists and civil engineers on the future and compared that against our Transportation Master Plan. And so that, once we get into that point, there will certainly be, considerations given to the vegetation survey and how that would relate to future habitat use and wildlife use, and that'll be taken into account as a component of the Trails Master Plan. Not a full-on wildlife study, but it will certainly be one component of the future trail connectivity in the city.
Thanks very much.
Other questions from council? I have quite a few, just clarifying questions mostly. I have, and I'll try to tell you what slides they're on in case that helps, but, or the page of the packet. One is that we've heard various percentages of Louisville being open space. The last one I heard was 40%. I noticed you said 24%, which is right. I gather yours is probably right, but have you heard that other percentage, and do you have any idea?
I haven't heard that number. We can run it through GIS again and confirm, but typically we just look at the acreage per square mile. But we can run that number again and get you a solid percentage. Maybe it is higher.
We get asked that question quite a bit, or have reason to use it. And this may be just city-owned open space and not joint. I don't know. I just was interested. Let's see. One, and this sort of vaguely refers to 358. It's the natural resources and fire mitigation. But we've used goats and we've used cattle to do the grazing. Which one is less expensive per acre to use?
So the cattle are less expensive, but the outcomes vary. So it depends what your goal is. The goats are really efficient if you're in woody areas. So the goats are great at reaching up and limbing vegetation. So if you have low branches and you're trying to keep fire from transferring from grasses into trees, goats are much more effective. If you're trying to convert systems from non-natives to more native systems in open areas and just reduce fuel, then cows are more affordable. And I would say they're doing a better job balancing mitigation and natural resource management. The goats are a little more intense in their treatment styles.
And I presume from your explanation, from that you're using each of those species in strategic ways.
Yes, all of our goat grazing has been done in more forested areas. So North Open Space is a good area. That's an example where the understory was really overgrown before we did the Siberian elm removals this year. So goats were focused on that area and Dutch Creek as well, since that is a more wooded area. The cattle are in what I would call more grassland prairie settings. So you'll see them at North Open Space, Davidson Mesa. So it's really, again, partnering natural resources, also with where the fire risk is in the city. So we're using every tool we have, and they're all used a little bit differently depending on what you're looking for.
Excellent. I appreciate that explanation. And I encourage you to explain that to the public too, in some of the outreach that you do, because I do know that regenerative agriculture is incredibly popular with the public. At least that's my impression. I see some nodding here. And this one goes down to the additional annual operational objective slide, which is 361. Actually, I'll come back to that as a comment. How many miles, you said 121 miles of perimeter are being mowed. That's out of how many miles of perimeter?
Let me refine that a little bit. So we have two different types of mowing going on. One is a trail edge mowing, which works as a fire break. So you get your trail edge plus your trail plus the other trail edge, and now you have an effective fuel break. So that's one. We also do that for visitor safety clearance. The other mowing operation that's occurring through contractual work is more of the property line mowing, which can be area mowing. So it can be from 12 feet to 30 plus feet, depending on the risk. So the 121 mile statistic is really referring to that trail edge mowing. So we have two sides of the trail. We do it multiple times a year, and that's what's getting us up to the 121. And that's really related to the 25 miles that we manage.
How are you mowing, in addition to that, around the perimeter of the city, between the city and open space that either is ours or, ours or the county's or?
Absolutely. So our in-house operations really focus on the trails, and then our contractual mowing focus on those perimeter mowing areas. So those are the fence lines from private property into open space, varying from 12 to 30 feet. At the areas identified based on risk in the wildfire risk assessment report. So the best resource, if you want to know where that is occurring, is to really look at that link of the story map. And again, you can zoom in by property and see. So not every property perimeter is being mowed, just properties that are higher risk for fire based on the direction of the wind and the type of fuel available.
Sure. And I know there are some areas that are not 60 feet wide between one fence and another. You obviously can't mow 60 feet worth of swath there. But I'm interested in that, because that's one of the questions we get is, wait, they're not mowing 30 feet out. And I guess it's good for us to know.
Yeah, that's correct. We are not doing 30 feet. We're really using the science available to us to determine what's appropriate. So sometimes it's the buffer, sometimes it's the buffer plus the trail, sometimes there's a ditch, sometimes it's not on the downward side of the wind, so it's not a high priority. So really, I would encourage citizens to find that link to the map or call us and really zoom in by property if you want to see where that's occurring.
Good. No, that's a great tool. I appreciate that and having you suggest that we look at that. This one is down 362. We're planning mostly is involved and will be involved in sort of evaluating the wildlife urban interface. And I guess I'm wondering what your, what open space role is going to be in that, if any?
Just to make sure I'm understanding the question, open space role in the WUI?
Yeah, just is there any cross-pollination
Absolutely. I mean, I would say our program has been ahead of the curve with WUI. We did the wildfire assessment early and started implementing early. So where the overlap is, we're controlling that park to the fence line, and then we're really looking for that collaboration from homeowners and other departments within the city to manage private land. Our task is really to focus on the public land, so we try to keep it there, but anytime that we do public educations on wildfire, we're inviting our partners to come. We're inviting our experts from Boulder County to speak about home hardening, to look at wooden fences, to look at what can private citizens do. Because really to succeed, we all have to collaborate. Not any one entity can solve this problem. So we're doing as much as we can on our side of the fence, and we really encourage homeowners and our WRA has a lot of links to resources for homeowners to understand better what they can do to protect their resources in combination with the efforts that we are already contributing.
Yeah, I mean, my sense is, generally speaking, I've heard just wonderful things about what you all are doing on fire mitigation. And I'm sure there are criticisms here and there, but you have a lot of expertise, which maybe doesn't necessarily stop at the fence line, even though that's your jurisdictional limit, if you will. So I'm glad to hear that. I was also really happy to hear the comments that you made about EDI. I was thinking about that just before you said it, and it really that's something I know quite a number of people care very deeply about in Louisville. It's obviously part of our policies, and I encourage that to continue. You talked mostly about what happened this last year. Is there anything on tap for next year's, EDI-related efforts in open space?
We are working away on our education plan for 2025 right now, so we're hoping to have a draft plan finalized for board review in January, so I can speak more to it at that time. But we definitely got positive support for the bike program, so we'll be bringing that back. And it's one of those things when we look at benchmarks, one thing we look at is participation in education, but I think there's also the quality of participation. So adaptive bikes might not pull in the numbers, but it sure pulls in a user group and experience we want to include. Same with bird watching.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want 50 people trying to look at that specific bird. You want 7 people in that group. So we'll continue to work to that goal and certainly look for guidance from City Council of other opportunities that we could add to the program.
Good. Last series of questions here. The money from, I'm interested in kind of ballot measure 1A, because I've certainly had plenty of comments from residents happy and more kind of unhappy, I suppose, with the speed with which those monies are getting doled out. I don't know whether that's justified or not, but remind me of when 1A was effective. Was it effective at the beginning of this year? Do you remember?
I'm not sure. No.
Don't, it's
no,
okay.
Sorry.
What you described a little bit of the collaboration between Boulder County and Louisville. I mean, if you had to rate it on a scale of 0 to 100, where 100 is you're working in lockstep and 0 is you're shooting arrows at each other, where would you put us on that?
Well, I'll give you a non-answer answer. My work with them just really started with the ditch conversations. If you ask Kiana Freeman in Recovery and Resiliency, who has been working closely with them for funding allocations and granting programs and that kind of thing, she may have a different opinion. From working directly with Boulder County Mountain Parks and Open Space, thus far, promises are good, and we've been relatively lockstep on the next steps with the ditches. But.
And so then I'll back up to the other part, which is when would you say that collaboration on 1A in particular began?
Those conversations happened approximately 6 weeks ago is when we started having those conversations, and in part probably as a follow-up to the same conversations Councilmember Fahey is having. But with the understanding that that's a brand-new position and the intention is 2025 is when that collaboration is going to get going, so.
How much have we received as a city under 1A? That may be a better question for city manager.
Yeah, Mayor, I don't have that answer in front of me right now. I do understand that that 1A was a ballot measure in 2022 and went into effect in 2023. I can certainly follow up and get more information if you'd like.
That would really be good. I would also say, to the extent, well, I can speak to this maybe. I'll wait till council comments. Those are the questions I had. Thank you, and thank you to council for your indulgence. Any other questions from council members? Okay, let's take some public comment. Do we have anybody signed up for public comment?
First up is Catherine Smith, followed by Susan McEachern. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Catherine Smith. I'm a Louisville resident. I'm very pleased to be here tonight, and I wanted to say at the beginning that as part of LOSA, I've worked with Ember and Adam and Sama this year, and I would say that we have, as you know, marvelous staff. And it's clear from tonight's presentation that they bring a wealth of skills and knowledge to the management of our open spaces. So I agree with Adam, small but mighty, small but talented. I'm not sure exactly which words you used. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of the open spaces because they're not able to speak. They're not able to appear here. They can't speak to you. Our city charter addresses the management of open space. And I am hoping now that we have a dedicated funding source and a public recognition, I think, more and more of the importance of open space to sustainability and to managing wildfires, that it's important that we do well manage our open space. Our city charter says that when managing the open space, the management should be consistent with good stewardship and sound ecological principles. It should preserve and promote native plants. And because I want to emphasize this, it doesn't say this in the charter, but it's preserve and promote native wildlife and preserve and promote their habitats. We also are to preserve and promote cultural resources, agriculture, scenic vistas, and appropriate passive recreation. I think we're really knocking it out of the park on the passive recreation, and I'd like to see us do a better job with promoting native plants, wildlife, and their habitats. I think it's a resources issue that I'm here today. I don't think it's a staff talent issue. And examples of things that I think we could do and should do are speed up the process of identifying what is on our open spaces, use that as a guideline for the restoration and protection of the properties of higher ecological value. And I want to speak up for the Coal Creek riparian area, which does need more water rights. I recognize that it's in part a resources issue and encourage you to allocate monies necessary to do what the city charter says we should. I wish you all a happy holiday.
Thank you, Catherine.
Next up is Susan, followed by Tamar.
Hello, I'm Susan McEachern. I'm chair of the Open Space Advisory Board and a private Louisville citizen as well. I'm not speaking on behalf of the Open Space Advisory Board, but I am speaking as chair in the sense that I've been very inspired by Ember's presentation and also by LOSA's concerns about what I hope Open Space Advisory Board's agenda will be for the coming year. I think that we really need to focus on our long-term goals for open space. I think that the Open Space Division has done remarkable work with limited resources. They're recognized as a leader in the scientific and research-based preservation and restoration of our open spaces. They have a much larger educational program than any other community our size. So I just want to, I've been on the board for 3 years and I've just been in awe of what the group has been able to accomplish over the time that I have seen them working. So I just want to say that the board is very aware of citizen and council concerns about open space and has a real commitment to making sure that our open spaces are restored and preserved, both for citizens and for native wildlife and all of our habitat that we take so much to heart. So I thank you for your consideration and your support of open space.
Thank you.
Next up is Tamar.
Hi, this is Tamar Krantz. I live in Ward 3. I thought I'm so happy that I listened to that presentation just now because looking at the slides didn't do it justice, and Ember really brought that to life. It makes me so happy to see all the things that we're doing here in Louisville on our open space. I don't know if this is the time to ask, but I was wondering if staff will be doing any more answering questions, if there's any more detailed plans for the new open space that's going to be planned at Red Tail Ridge. If there is any intention to preserve any of the wildlife at the pond, and if any intention to preserve any of the prairie dog colonies out there. Just kind of following up, it's been a while since the subdivision plat was approved, and I'm wondering where that's at. So if it's appropriate to ask that question, I would love to hear more on that. Thanks again.
Thank you, Tamara. Any other public comments? Okay, then we'll come back to council questions or comments. Yes. Councilmember Kern.
Since it's an appropriate time now to make a comment, I just wanted to say thank you. It's a really good presentation. I don't actually have additional questions for you. Should they come up, you guys always do an excellent job throughout the year. Appreciate the hard work and the big things to come in 2025, especially pursuing the remaining 15% of recommended wildfire prevention and mitigation efforts. Thanks a lot.
Other members of council, comments? I have really three kinds of comments. One has to do with the upcoming consulting work that's going to be done for a, I think, master plan. Yeah. I've said this before, and some of our citizens have said it before, particularly, I think, Matt Jones, who was involved in the original committee, and I think was very helpful in drafting our original plan years ago. But, parks and open space are very different, and in the sense of, one is primary, very much about use and development, and the other is very much about presentation and preservation and conservation. But I hope that in doing that work and overseeing and working with the consultant, that you bear that distinction very much in mind, and the more I don't want to say separate, but I hope there'll be separate teams on those two areas. That's your bailiwick. That's only from a policy standpoint. I think it will be more persuasive to the community, I think, to really have hard looks at both of those. And, you can speak to that if you like. Do you have a sense of that? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. We've heard that feedback loud and clear. We actually just received our submissions for consideration. The deadline was last week, and so we've began a review of, I believe we received 8 complete bids. So a large component of that bid review is ensuring that there is a subject matter expertise devoted to open space to be able to speak to that and garner feedback from the community specifically related to that area of our operation. So
That's great news. The other second one is that I know that it was not your intention here, but down on 361, the title of the slide is Additional Annual Operational Objectives, which sounds like not an afterthought, but perhaps slightly less important. I don't suspect, looking at it carefully, that that's necessarily what you meant. But we heard loud and clear in the citizen survey that it is really important to the residents that we do maintenance and that we do good restoration and so forth. That is something that I think quite a few people feel that at times we don't emphasize enough. And, there's a lot of different pressures tugging. There's pressures on acquisition and so forth. But that is a really fundamental portion of what we do. I don't know that I need to say anything more about it. I believe that that's something you know, but I want to say it from the dais because I know our citizens have expressed very, very strong opinions about that. You talked a little bit about EDI. Again, I applaud you for that and the rest of the presentation. The questions that I have shouldn't be interpreted as in any way really a challenge to any of it. I think it just blows me away as to how much you're doing, honestly. One thing I'd suggest is perhaps programs on neurodivergent populations. There's a lot of kids and adults, I think, who have challenges interacting with natural spaces for a whole bunch of reasons. Some of them see, I have twin nephews who are on the spectrum, what they see out there is fundamentally different than what we do. We might see a nice field, they see 40 different types of grass and, clumps of grass that are 200, very, very dense, and some others, and it can be really overwhelming for some, and they need to experience it differently. I think helping our whole community to be able to appreciate the open space, the importance of it, does a lot for mental health, but it also, for every reason that you've listed as the importance of open space, I think it ties into those folks. It's just often, I don't want to say overlooked, but it's certainly, there's a lot more knowledge about that in recent years, and I just encourage that. Any other things from council? If not, we'll just move on. Thank you very much. All right. Next is ordinance number 1889, series 2024, an ordinance amending Title V of the Louisville Municipal Code concerning liquor and marijuana licensing, second reading, public hearing. Was advertised in the Daily Camera on December 8th, 2024. I'm going to open the public hearing and ask for staff presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Jenny Klein, interim city clerk and secretary to the local licensing authority. I do not have a presentation tonight. In your staff report, there are just some changes that we are making or asking to be made to the municipal code for liquor and marijuana licensing so that they align with the statutes that the Colorado General Assembly passed earlier this year. And I'm here for any questions.
Council questions? Yes, Councilmember Cooper.
All right. I think I have 3 questions.
Sure.
The first one, I was wondering, do you see any upsides or downsides to the biennial licensing as opposed to the annual licensing for the city specifically?
For the city specifically, I think we're neutral on that point. The way that it's going to roll out, there was some concern in the beginning that the state was going to push everybody to a biennial license, so we were going to have really heavy workload years and years where we really weren't doing anything. But the way that they're rolling it out, it's going to flow out that the workload is going to stay the same. And folks do have the option, I've already seen it, folks have the option of, paying their fee, at one time or splitting the fee up. And folks are actually opting to split the fee up. So it's really not going to have an impact on revenue. So I think the change is going to be neutral in all aspects.
Okay. I was also, there's some language around modification of premises. And I was curious, how does the language regarding marijuana premises, how does that compare to language for any other sort of modification of premises for a different kind of business? Is it the same, or is it more restrictive, or?
Actually, it's a little bit looser. I was actually really surprised because now the language says that if a marijuana establishment is going to modify their premise, they don't have to ask permission first. With a liquor license, they still have to ask permission. So it was a little surprising to me that they're allowing marijuana licenses only to report any changes that they've made at time of renewal. And by we, I mean myself and Community Development Director Zuccaro, decided that that wasn't in the best interest of Louisville, and so that's why we are asking that we retain the local control of requiring a modification of premise for any marijuana establishment.
Okay, that's very helpful. And then my last question, can you give me a sense for, aside from the licensing, is the city involved at all with sort of enforcement related to liquor or marijuana establishments? In particular, like there's this new provision around they can sell at a marijuana dispensary, right? They can sell non-marijuana products, but only up to a certain amount. So like, do we have to look after their reporting on that, or is that controlled by the state?
It can be done either at the local level or the state level. I will be perfectly honest, in the last few months, I haven't had time to do any education or enforcement, but once we get a city manager hired and I go back to my regular job, that's one of the things I really want to do is pick back up some of the enforcement with the Louisville Police Department, not only for marijuana, but for liquor. And I will let you know that they have been really great about letting us know if there is an issue. We have a member of the Louisville Police Department that attends licensing authority meetings, and he's been great to letting us know if there are any issues that have come up with any establishments.
Okay, thanks very much.
Sure.
Other questions? I've got a couple of questions. One is, I noticed that there's a provision about what happens when there's a license expiration, which has been cut out of the ordinance. I'm presuming, well, let's go back to a more fundamental question. Is it correct to say that all of the changes to our ordinance are driven by changes at the state level, or are there
Yes.
some? Okay, good. What's going to happen if somebody lets their license expire? I can't quite imagine somebody wanting to do that, but there was a provision about what's to happen there, and it looks like there's no remedy for that. They presumably have to file another license requirement. I'm looking at page 366 of the packet. It's section 5.10.090B or C.
So that's under, that just applies to marijuana licensing. And they took that out. I believe the intent for them taking it out was so people wouldn't file late, because there were a lot of people that were filing late. And I think this just adds a measure of now you're not allowed to file late at all.
Okay, and that's fine. I just was curious. It seemed like it was not a drastic measure, but it sure, if I had one of those licenses, I would definitely want to be doing it timely and not waiting around in the least. And that probably will happen, so they don't have to go through the process anymore. There was
Mayor, I would add one thing, that in Louisville, we're limited to the number of licenses we can give out. So if someone lets theirs lapse, that leaves it open to someone else taking it. So I don't think anyone's going to let that happen.
Gotcha. This is also, I'm looking down at prohibited acts, and the language which was formerly in there was, or depending on how we vote on this, unlawful actions included selling marijuana or retail marijuana products over the internet, one, or delivering marijuana or marijuana products to a person not physically present in the licensed premises. I remember very clearly going through this part when we were addressing a previous version, and primarily worried about folks that were not present and the dangers of sending people, some kind of delivery service to somebody's house and all that. But that's been eliminated in state
Yes.
law entirely.
They are now allowed to sell over the internet and to deliver. I do believe there are regulations in place that the person who placed the order has to be the person that receives the order. The person who is doing the delivery has to check the ID of the person. So there are safeguards in place.
Okay.
I was surprised by that too.
Yeah. The third question I don't need to ask. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Other questions? Nope. All right. Let's go to our first round of public comment. Just so everybody's clear, the reason there's two rounds of public comment is this is a change to our ordinance, and the public gets two shots at us to ask questions if they choose to. Do we have any public comment requests? No. All right. Let's go to council comments or questions. Any discussion at the moment? Okay. Any public comment? Just, nope. All right. So let's go back to Council discussion. Any thoughts about this? Concerns? Questions? Yeah, go ahead.
As I understand, basically we are updating our ordinances to reflect changes at the state level. And I think pretty much the only thing that is different is about the modification of premises. And I'm satisfied with the way that staff has chosen to write that part of the ordinance. So I'm support.
Any other comments? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. Is there a motion on ordinance number 1889?
I move that we pass ordinance number 1889, series 2024, an ordinance amending Title 5 of the Louisville Municipal Code concerning liquor and marijuana licensing upon second reading.
Second. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, let's take a roll call vote.
Mayor Pro Tem Dickinson?
Yes.
Mayor Lay? Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Cooperman?
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey?
Yes.
Councilmember Kern?
Yes.
Great, passes. Thank you very much. I've had a request for a 5-minute break. I think we are just take a quick check-in. We cool with finishing up the full agenda tonight? Fingers up or thumbs up? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. Be back at 7:55.
That's wonderful.
For the 2025 legislative agenda, if we'll start with a staff presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. But you have before you the draft 2025 legislative agenda. It is based on the 2024 one. Generally, the legislative agenda is used as a guiding document for the city's engagement with legislative affairs. So as the state legislature starts to meet and starts, inundating us with all these new rules they want. Shared with all of our neighboring communities and our legislatures. Now that I've finished, the microphone's coming.
This one's out.
So,
Right, thank you. If you could maybe, well, we'll see if there's any questions. Do we have any questions?
I will note, yes, Councilmember Cooperman did note I made an error in the 24 to 25 one. So there's a section that's been added in the version you have in your addendum tonight related to fuel from aircraft.
Okay. It referenced previous year.
Yeah.
Other questions? Good.
Just one note on that correction. So in the addendum to tonight's packet, I think you highlighted that. I think in an adjacent item, there was a word about preservation of air quality as opposed to improvement of air quality, which I think was previously changed, and that didn't seem to be reflected in the addendum.
Okay, we'll make that change. Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Okay, I will then close the public hearing and, do you have other questions?
Are we just giving questions now, or are we discussing?
Actually, I apologize. If there's any council questions now or direction, otherwise we're gonna, actually, I didn't take public comment. Yikes, sorry about that. Do we have public comment?
I have Catherine Smith.
Okay. Sorry about that, Catherine.
I was about to flag you down.
I have no doubt.
Hi, I'm Catherine Smith. I live in Ward 3. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about the new authority that is being proposed. To me, it seemed like it was a little bit vague, and I wasn't sure. As I was reading through, I would know when something was being clear, as the city's position was being clearly stated, and when it wasn't. So if I was sitting in your shoes, I wouldn't know when I would be able to act. And so I would suggest that you maybe flag or star the things where you really are stating a firm position where someone can act, or maybe identify where you have statements of principle versus statements of position, so that it provides clear guidance to people. And then I have to say, in the discussion of oil and gas, it was unclear to me. It was clear we wanted to have the flexibility to do something different than what the state is saying that we should do. We wanted to be able to customize. I couldn't tell if we wanted any controls, and I couldn't tell if we wanted to be more stringent or less stringent. I personally think that it's okay for localities to be able to be more stringent, but if they are going to be less stringent on environmental controls, then I have a deep concern. I also think that this is an area that's really kind of fraught right now with the change in administration at the federal level, the desire to be even more aggressive in oil and gas development. And so I would raise a red caution flag here rather than seek to change very much of anything. If we can maintain the controls we have, we're probably lucky. And that's it. Thanks for your time. Happy holidays to everyone. And thanks to all of you for all that you do.
Thank you, Catherine. Thanks for all you do, too.
Thank you.
And all of those who've spoken to us this year. Looks like that's it. Okay, so let's come back to council questions and discussion. Are any questions initially? Otherwise, we can get going with a discussion. Yes, Councilmember Cooperman, start us off.
Just one question. I'm curious, do we ever update the legislative agenda during the year, like in response to something that might happen at the county or state level or the federal level?
Generally, if it's something big enough that the council's interested in it, we take up a position on the bill or whatever specifically that is, and we don't update the agenda. We would just address that specific issue.
Okay, thanks.
Other comments, questions? Okay, I do have comments on this. And this was one of the things I learned out of the first year of being mayor, because I probably got more, I'm gathering more requests from organizations to take positions on different pieces of legislation and so forth. The way I handled those, I think I'm going to try to reflect it in some language change that I think I'd like you guys to consider. One of the problems, and I think Ms. Smith kind of suggested it, is that these are fairly general. In my experience in various organizations, this is no more specific nor vague than any other organization. We just passed one in the Northwest Mayors and County Commissioners that's very similar in its specificity. What happens during the course of the legislative session is that there are plenty of bills that get introduced at the beginning, but get introduced in the middle, and sometimes, as with the big bill that the governor, through legislators, literally put in the last week or so of the session, maybe 2 weeks, which was incredibly controversial for local governments, essentially seeking to strip all of our land use authority, that it's kind of needful that we respond quickly. And that's not just, issues that I deal with. A number of you are on committees that we've just assigned you to that have this come up. In particular, DRCOG is one of them. There's a couple others that are listed there. In Colorado Municipal League, I would ask to add Metro Mayor's Caucus, because that's probably the single biggest one that asks me most often to sign on or not. This is one where judgment, I think, is going to be necessary for each council member. I have been on councils where the mayor took positions on things that were clearly very controversial on council, and it was not a good picture. That's, but I think this needs to be used more broadly by other council members who serve on these committees. I don't want people to be hamstrung just because the language isn't specific enough. What I was going to suggest, apart from adding perhaps in the beginning of the second paragraph, regional efforts such as the Metro Mayor's Caucus, and then the rest of them I think are fine. If anybody wants to add to that, that's fine, but I think that one is enough to call out. What I was going to suggest, though, for the third paragraph is a change complete change to the first sentence. As it reads, it says, if this legislative agenda clearly states the city's position, council members may express support, opposition, or recommended amendments. What I would prefer that it says, and I'll explain it, is council members, just a little more active. Council members may express support, opposition, and/or recommended amendments if those are consistent with the legislative agenda. And the reason I'm suggesting that is because I think it's going to be really difficult in the clinch to make that decision. I think our council for my last year is less likely to sort of fundamentally disagree with most of what's in here. That hasn't always been true, and it's not necessarily true in every possible case. I think bringing it back to council is a good thing because we can do kind of, if you will, an after action. If somebody feels like, ooh, you stepped out a little too much on that one, Judy or Chris or whoever it is that's making a statement, I think we can do a better job at fine tuning. But I do think saying that clearly states the city's position sounds too narrow to me, based on my experience and having to consider this over and over and over again. One place last year, most of them I felt were consistent with the legislative agenda last year. There was one that wasn't, which was a tax increase. It was not tax increase. It was reauthorizing the debrucing of certain RTD revenues. And that was a tax measure, and I was not going to speak for council on that. That was just not, it struck me as too important. And we talked about it, and it was fine in the end to state a position, but I think it was better to do. So that's one. Why don't we talk about that, because it is new, and I'd be very interested if other people have thoughts about that. People comfortable with that language? I can read it again and I can send to the staff what the language is in case, thumbs up? Okay. The next set of changes, and I don't need to go through all of these, but there's, in many cases, I'll give you an example. In home rule local control, look at the second bullet if you have it in front of you. It says the city generally opposes state legislation that creates unfunded mandates on local municipalities. Without state funding or other sources of revenue, unfunded mandates may shift the cost and burden of state mandates onto local governments, limiting municipalities' ability to provide locally identified government service. That's fine as far as it goes, but there are unfunded mandates from the federal government too. And it's important, I think, to oppose those generally if there's not funding attached to it. The item may be fine, but not providing money to go with it is, I think, a real threat to our doing things. It's just like the measure we talked about earlier today, that there may be an unfunded mandate to keep track of certain activities of marijuana businesses. Well, we don't, that comes with no extra money. So that's, again, I can go through all of those in the document, but I think it's, what I am concerned about, I will tell you, is we're about ready to change administrations, and I think it's very easy when a new administration comes in to be not necessarily, eliminating funding for certain items that they're going to fall to the cities and states to deal with. And that has been, that's been a problem. I mean, there's a problem in this current administration, federal administration, when folks there were undocumented and documented migrants moving to cities without any money at all from the federal government. And that was a huge issue. It was a huge issue in Metro Mayors. And it doesn't mean that it's not something we ought to deal with. It's something that we needed something to push back against the federal government to give us money to help us with that, because it's going to affect us. And to protect our own fisc, if you will, that's the kind of thing. I mean, there are a variety of situations that just mention state.
Are you just saying you'd like to add the word federal?
Yeah, not in every one. There's a differentiation, but I could circulate, if you will, all the places where I think it applies. Some of them, for example, the ones that talk about Tabor. Well, Tabor's a state measure. It's not a federal measure. So, but anyway.
And if I may, Mayor, I think staff, if council is supportive of that, can take that back and edit this to make sure that we're generalizing areas that can apply both federally and state.
That's good. Are people generally supportive of that? Have concerns about it? Thumbs up, thumbs down? It's not a matter of, by the way, like saying that you automatically support some federal legislation or automatically are opposed to it. It's a matter of funding and just having things imposed on you without that extra piece. And then I think that's the main thing that I had. I would also say if there are, during the legislative sessions, issues that come up, and we think this should be revisited, we could do that. We've never done that before. But frankly, it's good to keep abreast of these things. I will try to keep council abreast of them. Everybody who's on an outside committee who, hears something or it's where somebody is asking us for a position, I think we want to oblige to our, our fellow or sister cities and counties when we can. But sometimes we end up having to go too slow and letters have to get out. Legislators have to be informed and that kind of stuff. All right. Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you. I just have one minor suggestion, looking at the purpose and use text. The third paragraph, last sentence, where it talks about taking any formal action, parentheses, such as signing a letter, I would be in favor of either removing that parentheses or adding formal vote as well to that. I'm fine with either one, whichever direction my council members want to go in.
I'll read it out loud for those who are listening. When this occurs, and that is when the legislative agenda is consistent with something we're being asked to amend or support or oppose, council members should share with all council during council reports at the next regular council meeting. Now this is the sentence, I'm sorry. If the issue is not clearly addressed in the legislative agenda, council members should seek council approval before taking any formal action, such as writing a letter to support or oppose legislation. I appreciate your raising that, because I think the language that I read before should mirror, or that section should mirror the earlier language if we're going to have it. But tell me what your reason for wanting the such as signing a letter.
I'm not saying that I want it. I think it's very specific and it excludes voting, which is also a very important formal action. So we either add voting or we just take out such as signing a letter and just say any formal action. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, are you understanding that to mean?
I can explain.
Yeah, please.
So the way I read this is that if an issue is not clearly addressed in this agenda, that council member who's representing us should seek approval from us all before taking a formal action to support or oppose that piece of legislation. And to me, a formal action not only means signing a letter, which I don't know how often we do that, as opposed to voting in our committees on something on behalf of the city. So I think we should either add another specific example or just take away the one example that's there and just leave it at any formal action.
I read it somewhat differently, as the formal action is the action of the person who's trying to, who's being asked to do something. I think, I don't know, because I didn't write this. Maybe.
It could be, generally, we are asked to sign letters. That seems to be the majority of the thing we're getting, so that's why that was added. But putting in or taking a formal vote is easy enough to clarify that any type of action like that would be subject to this.
And your suggestion is we look at it as a council action.
I think just add it, because I actually read it the exact same way that Barbara did. And I think let's just add it in, because I think with the exception of maybe staff and the mayor, none of us are signing letters. We are voting at different boards and committee meetings. So just add vote, it's clarity. That way, this current council or any future ones, there's no question that voting, even in an informal kind of meeting, is you're representing us. You need to have something where if we don't know how we all feel on the topic, you need to find out before you vote.
Yeah, is that what you're suggesting too?
We're on the same page.
Okay. I think that to be consistent with the first sentence, I don't like the language, different language, but the clearly addressed. I think what I had suggested for the first sentence was council members may express support, opposition, or recommended amendments if the
Mayor will make those languages consistent throughout. Yep.
All right. Yeah. I mean, it's sort of, yeah. Good. And maybe even in that first sentence, we ought to refer to the taking of votes, because it's not just support up. I don't know. Anyway, I'll let you, because we're going to come back and vote on this. Yeah. Okay. I think we copacetic? Or we're not copacetic?
We're good. Thank you.
Okay. Then, yes, go ahead. Councilmember Cooperman.
Sorry, I did have a few more comments. So I guess two general comments. One comes back to this sort of issue around clarity. I guess I'm wondering, like, are we interested in doing a deeper dive and trying to make any of the items more specific or clearer than they currently are? I mean, there are a few places where I feel like I don't understand which direction the item is going. I could point those out if there's interest. I don't know. That's just a feeling that I have. Like, you know, if we want to be judging the consistency of the agenda with something we're doing in a committee, I think it would be beneficial for it to be clear, right, or as clear as possible.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. I think that's a good suggestion. Do you have specific ones that you're thinking about here?
So one of them is the one about oil and gas development. There's also one about Tabor, which I thought was not particularly clear.
Start with the one about oil and gas. Which, was that in energy environment?
Yeah, I think.
What would are you talking about the very first paragraph, or are you talking about the bullets? Tell us where you're looking.
Yeah, so it's the fourth bullet point under home rule local control.
Home rule control is above. 2, 3, 4. The one that begins, the city supports maintaining local government authority to regulate oil and gas development at the local level.
Right. So I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, maybe is it trying just to say that we want to maintain the status quo essentially, and that we're in favor of state rules or regulations that maintain the status quo as opposed to move us away from it? Is that?
I don't think it's referencing oil and gas, Josh. I think what it's referencing is our local control. So it's about the municipality having that control versus giving it away and allowing either the state or the federal government to tell us how that goes. Has nothing to do with sustainability. You could put in there corn and, water. You wouldn't have to call it oil and gas. It's us, the city, having the control of that. Am I correct about that under the home rule?
This specifically comes from a few years ago when the state was considering making oil and gas development a matter of statewide concern, which would mean we wouldn't have any local say in it. Mm-hmm. So this is our encouragement to not do that and to keep our local control over these issues.
Okay.
I mean, we could say, I don't know if this is what you're getting at, but would you?
Yeah, so maybe it's clearer than I thought.
Redevelopment? I mean, I don't know. Or are you comfortable with what it is?
I think that discussion clarifies it a lot for me. I don't know if we want to make oil and gas as an example in the statement of the item as opposed to it specifically referring to oil and gas, but.
I think there's still concerns out there about local authority over oil and gas. For example, we have a neighboring community that was looking at an oil permit that would have drilled underneath them. So it's specific. It is kind of specific to that issue.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to be fine with that one. Under tax and finance policy, right there, the first item says it is important to address the layers of constraints on state and local government budgets resulting from the taxpayers' Bill of Rights, and I just don't know like which way are we leaning towards in terms of those constraints.
I think it's mostly pointing out that Tabor limits us to doing a lot of things. So that.
But are we trying to say that those limitations are not good or that
No, I
are
think it's
good,
that
or-
they aren't good and that the city, that those have been imposed on us. And now when the state legislature makes rules, they have to keep this in mind, that we have Tabor also limiting what we can do.
I don't know, do other people think that's clear enough, or?
Classically, fiscal conservancy, when you're referencing Tabor, means just that. There are layers of spending accountability, and when you're talking about fiscal accountability, that's usually fiscally conservative. And so therefore, that's what that's what we're saying, that as a city, we support are these layers of measures that hold all the spending accountable to the requirements of Tabor. More money, and so that's just generally, that's, I think, what it is.
I don't think that's what it says.
Yeah, I'm
I
going
think
to
it's the
disagree with
opposite,
that. I
actually.
think it's kind of the opposite.
Yeah, let me make a suggestion. I think this is more something that we're hoping that the legislators do as they're considering this. One thing you could say is the city supports fiscally responsible government spending, but believes it is important for legislators to, I don't know, you could say respect. You could say it's important for legislators to address. It's not us that we're concerned about there. It's what the legislators are doing. Or the first part of the sentence says that we're going to be fiscally responsible, which I don't think is a conservative or a liberal issue. I think it's just good government. But, you know, I don't know. I think what's happened in the past is that the state government particularly has not recognized that the cities are bound or have been bound, you know, by Tabor limits on certain things that are problematic, and they don't take that into account in the measures that they're passing. So, yeah, go ahead.
So I think the fact that we have different interpretations of this is highlighting the lack of maybe clarity or understanding here. But the way I read it is that we as a city think we should spend money responsibly. Tabor was put in place to put constraints on spending, and we don't feel we need that because we're responsible in our spending. So I read it actually as that Tabor isn't necessarily a good thing because we're responsible on our own, and it's important to address the constraints that Tabor puts on us and our ability to spend. That's how I read that, which is an exact opposite of what Councilmember Kern read, but I think maybe along the lines of what you were trying to describe, Mayor.
Do you have a suggestion for language there?
I mean, I'll look at staff. I think you hear there's maybe some confusion here and clarity needed. I don't want to wordsmith from the dais at 8:30 at night, but can you maybe add some clarity there for us?
We will do our best.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't think, one other thing I would say is, one way to kind of reconcile the interpretations is not to say but believes. That sounds like these are two different things. I mean, fiscally responsible government spending, I bet we've got 7 votes for that without taking a poll. And, you know, for legislators to have to think about when they're passing their measures that we have these Tabor issues too, just means like, go easy on us, you know. Yeah, I don't think it necessarily means we should do away with Tabor. My bet is the council wouldn't fully agree on that. I don't know for sure, but
It feels like we should either decide whether we're pro or anti-Tabor and have a clear statement, or remove it entirely because it has no purpose.
no, I think it's, but it's
There's just not like, well, but.
It's a
so
neutral
That's my
statement.
point. Neutral is like, hey, so Tabor, so how am I supposed to represent our opinion on, you know, it's complicated. There's no point in having it in there if there's no direction. So we can make a direction, like, we don't appreciate what Tabor does to our ability to, use and spend our own taxes, and that's our stance. We don't like Tabor's effect on us. And so if you ask this council, that's our answer. And if that's not our answer, if it's the opposite, we'll say that. If we don't have a clear answer, then why is it in here at all?
I think the answer to that is that there are times, particularly with state legislation, where the legislature is not paying attention to those constraints. And it's good to have that authorization in our legislative agenda that says not just that we're fiscally responsible, that doesn't say anything with respect to legislation. That just says what we do. It's important to hold the higher authorities, particularly the legislative authorities in Colorado, to respecting that. If they don't respect it because they're imposing something on us that messes with our constraints imposed by Tabor, then we're going to oppose it. Anyway, I think, in other words, I think it's necessary to say something. I don't think it's necessary to say Tabor's good or bad. It's just that if you disregard us, municipalities, and our impact from Tabor-related limits, then that's a problem for us. And it allows, for example, me to go to Metro Mayors and sign on to a letter when they find that kind of impact is there. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if it'd be easiest to just change the word "but" to "and."
Yeah, if I may, I think I'm getting a feel for where council is going with some clarifying language and making sure that it's usable. So we'd be happy to draft that and then share that when it comes back to council.
Fair enough. We exhausted topic? No, we have not. Go ahead, Mr. Cooperman.
Okay, so the other sort of overarching comment I wanted to make, in our work planning, right, we have our lenses of environmental sustainability and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And when I read through our legislative agenda, I do not feel like those are the two lenses that we're applying to this agenda. And so I'm wondering about, maybe this is a larger project, not that they don't appear anywhere in the agenda, but I don't feel, so maybe as a larger project, it would be interesting to, go through the legislative agenda with those two lenses in mind, and see where we can make adjustments from those perspectives. But I'm not sure we want to do that now, but
we probably don't have time to do it right now. I guess I differ on the environmental sustainability. I think there's plenty in there about that. There could be more. You could suggest that. I think I encourage people, if they have additional changes, to suggest them before the next change. I mean, we've had, one of the things that we've done in the past is different council people have literally done an email saying, I'd like these changes, and then we discuss it. That helps. I am mindful, though, that the legislative session is coming up and things come fast and furious. And even right now, there's different measures that are bubbling up that really need us to, I don't want to push it too fast. I don't want to be caught flat-footed if we can avoid it. But there isn't. You're right. I don't know that there's any word equity, diversity or inclusion in here. That seems pretty reasonable to think about.
Yeah, if I may, we did have our EDI manager last year review this for that, and they changed a number of small language pieces throughout this to try and make sure that we were fitting EDI in this. I will say at the end of the day, this is council's legislative agenda, so if you want more time on this or want to take a second look with any additional lenses or make sure that we revisit and really have captured your intentions, we can certainly find a schedule moment for that for you.
When is it supposed to come back?
January 7th.
I don't want to wait I mean, I'm one person. I don't want to wait any longer than that. So if we can get it done, you know, we've got another January 7th time, but we've really got to get, if we're going to have one, it's not going to be useful. It's not going to be very useful.
Yeah, one thing I'd suggest is if you do have suggested changes, to get them to us prior to the packet going out on the 7th, and that way you guys can see it before the meeting and have a better discussion.
And maybe you can indicate who's proposing what. So, yeah. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that sounds fine. Just to clarify, like, I was going to suggest a couple very specific additions. Should I send those to you and then have you send those out, or should I say anything tonight about those? Or
I think that's up to council and how you want to take next steps here.
That's something you want to raise tonight?
I can raise it now, or I can put it in an email, either way.
Could you summarize it now? And then put it into writing, just so we know what to expect.
Sure. So there's just a few specific things I was interested in taking positions on. One would be opposing the state preemption on pesticide regulations. One would be supporting stronger efforts at the state level for complying with Clean Air Act. And I was also interested in a position on, there was recently a Truth, Restoration, and Education report from People of the Sacred Land, which is about how Indigenous people were treated in Colorado over the last few hundred years. And there are some recommendations in there for what could be done in terms of restoration. There was a program at the library on this several weeks ago, and I was also curious about whether we would be interested in taking a position on some of those recommendations.
Can I suggest you propose language? Yeah. Would you like to have that discussion tonight, or language proposed? Yes, Councilmember Hamilton.
I don't feel prepared to have a discussion on those topics tonight. I'd need to have more information on it, but I'm open to learning more and then having discussions of whether or not it's included on this agenda or if we include it on a future legislative agenda as well. But I need more info before I can make a decision.
People comfortable with that?
I think I'd also be interested to know if there's anything being proposed in the legislature, the state legislature this year, that's relevant to that, and if it is, to connect the dots for us. If it's not, it may not be like as urgent or pertinent. So.
Good, thanks. And one last thing, maybe would be helpful if you see some kind of good legislative summary of the bills that are already, if not in the hopper, that are one step removed from the hopper. As soon as the hopper is open, they will go in there. That might be useful for council to see. It's not going to cover the map. There's so many that come up in the middle of it, but I think that might give us a little bit of context for this that doesn't exist right now. Okay, good. To the 2024 work plan closeout.
All right, thank you, council. Our microphone has taken over the presentation computer, so just a minute. Amazing. Okay. Perfect. Well, thank you, Mayor, Council. This is your 2024 work plan wrap-up. Please. I swear this is not my first time. This is your 2024 work plan wrap-up. I have a few slides for you, and I'll go pretty quick here. I just want to make sure we take a moment to acknowledge some of the huge work that we did in 2024. And tonight we'll do that. We'll get an update on your work plan. We'll celebrate some of the accomplishments. We'll acknowledge some of the challenges. And then we'll look towards our 2025 work plan. As you know, we started setting priorities for 2025 already this year. That work plan is anticipated to look a little different. We set 4 priorities and 2 lenses that were used throughout your budget process. The really exciting thing about 2025, and then I'll stop talking about 2025 and get back to 2024, is that your priorities on your work plan, your 2 lenses, resident survey, your comprehensive plan, vision, and values that council affirmed this year, and then your budget, because you use these for the budget, are all in alignment. That is major as far as how we are going to be able to work together consistent with our community and make progress in 2025. So as we go through tonight, I encourage council to reflect on 2024, reflect on what you've done and how you felt about the 2024 work plan, and think about that coming to our 2025 work plan discussion on January 14th. 2024 was a big year for Louisville. There was a lot of growth, change. It was marked by recovery, transition, and unexpected challenges, as well as substantial victories. And I want to take a moment to recap some of those. I would be remiss if I didn't identify that it was a challenging year. Louisville has had a lot of hard years. This was not our hardest year, and I'm very thankful for that. But there are still some elephants in the room, right? We had a lot of transition. We had a number of council members change. We had a manager change. We had some significant turnover coming into 2024, which marks its own challenges. We had a challenging budget, a CrowdStrike IT attack, power outages. We had tragedy in our community, illness that took down swaths of staff and council members at times. We had a Steinbach Pavilion with unexpected repairs. It was not easy. And we balanced through all of that. The mayor alluded earlier to, there were also changing priorities. 2024 was a year of a lot of legislative mandates. Things came out that we had to address that we may not have planned to address. We still did a lot through all of that. And I really want to highlight core services here because I think it's sometimes easy to take for granted the core services that your city is always doing. Maintaining that police force, the streets, your water turns on, your toilet flushes, right? These are important things that are part of city function that we sometimes forget about. They're not always as shiny and exciting to look at. But in addition to that, we did do a lot of really exciting things in 2024. We did the Resilience Sculpture, Pet Memorial, a new communication system, which I cannot speak highly enough about the work we are doing and can continue to do there. We had 350K recreation membership visits, 15% increase at the library. We had open space 2C actions. You heard a lot about open space tonight. We reintroduced our mental health co-responder program, park reopenings, huge number of projects, ward meetings, and countless system improvements that we did throughout this organization. I mean, if you're tired, there's a reason. And I'll tell you, as I even highlight our Clean Air Championship Award, our first electric fleet, some of the awards that we got for our waterworks teams, individual awards and team awards, second best tasting water, though there might be a conspiracy. We think it's number 1. And our best public golf course, really, there's so much more. I could spend your whole night talking about our accomplishments. We added more to this packet, and I hope that you all take a look at those accomplishments. We're going to work to keep sharing more of these out, get more of these into our communications, highlight more of these things we're doing, because it is truly impressive what we are doing here in Louisville. As I shared with some of you, the second I put this packet in and gave it to Jenny, I realized, oh, I missed this, I missed that, right? It's ongoing what we've truly done. So I won't keep you all night talking about all of our accomplishments and listing them, but I do want to highlight our 2024 plan. You had a whopping 35 items on your 2024 FERC plan, broken out into priority level. And we're going to talk a little bit about each of those going through. And it's important to remember most of these items are above and beyond your day-to-day work, your core services. So your high priority items, and I know we hate reading slides, but I'm going to read these because these are your top items. The comprehensive plan, strategic land use code updates, open space management, transportation topics, economic vitality, affordable housing, climate change, fire hardening. This is a lot. And these are challenging items that are big, complex, take multi-years, and are often competing with each other for resources, as well as how you think about writing code updates that impact all of these. All of these items are in progress. All of them are on track. All of them are multi-year items. It takes time to do each and every one of these. I suspect that many of these will continue into your 2025 work plan. I know the comprehensive plan will, for example. I want to highlight some of our accomplishments on these as well. I think it's really impressive that we got about 10% of the community engaged on the comprehensive plan so far. That is a huge number. I threw it out aspirationally at the start of this, and I gotta say I was pretty impressed with our team that they got it there. That was a really good outreach program. You affirmed your vision and values for that. We've got a lot of development code improvements that have happened that make our economic vitality processes easier. You've heard a lot about open space. You've heard about award-winning bike and pedestrian safety improvements. We had our first EV Day retreat. We had major businesses recruited this year. We had our housing plan adopted, made huge progress on decarbonization efforts, and got millions of dollars in grants for this. Fire hardening, we did a BOCO alert test that reached about 35,000 people. Now, for those of you following, you know that's not our population size. We're about 21K, which means we probably reached employees who realize that they can sign up if they work in Louisville, family members who might be watching people in Louisville. So we got that reach out there. And we had our first ever disaster preparedness month. So really, through a year of transition, we kept all of these high priority items going. We also kept your medium priority items going. Some of these looked a little bit different with our year of transition. Your medium items, equity, diversity, and inclusion, sustainability programs, recreation amenities, the PROS long-range plan that you've heard a little bit about, potential minimum wage adjustments, potential Main Street closure, and board and commission engagement. All of these were conversations that we've had throughout the year, some of them many times and with varying results. We have 4 of these that we've considered complete at this point in time, though we know conversations may come back for some of these, and 3 that are ongoing. We believe that right now, EDI and sustainability will be incorporated into your 2025 work plan as your lenses through which you're reviewing everything. And we made some huge strides here. One of the things we did in 2024 was we brought in our first EDI training for boards and commissions and councils. We did a digital accessibility plan. We actually ran out of money on some of our sustainability programs. We'd like more to give away. We know we're balancing the budget there. Board and commission council reinstituted meetings with boards and commissions. We got work plans from boards and commissions, engaged them during the budget process, engaged them on your priorities. We had minimum wage discussions, which I want to highlight the regional coordination of this piece. We partnered with 5 cities to do a massive outreach and engagement campaign to bring information to council so you could make an informed decision. Getting 5 cities to move in a coordinated effort is not easy. We also had volunteer appreciation. We re-brought back our appreciation event that hadn't happened since before COVID. So these are huge strides. Low priority, you had 4 items. This is where you start to see some things that adjusted because of our workload, because of incoming priorities, legislative mandates. This is what the low priority section is for. We know that if we need to adjust things, this is where we adjust them. Some of your on hold items were our Old Town overlay and development impact fees. These are things that we'll continue talking about and will be really helpful to be informed by the comprehensive plan. Your highlights, your completed items, we adopted a new campaign finance regulations, and we implemented a new communications software, which that came streamlined sign-up, improvements in our messaging there, ability to text message. Some of you may recall, we actually added communication staff this year. 2024 is the first time we ever had a dedicated communications manager for the city. So we've done a lot of work trying to bring that one voice, holistic, transparent communication to the next level, and we'll keep doing that in 2025. Now, your ongoing items. These are the things we're trying to mark that regularly come to your agenda, things that are happening periodically over the years. Something that struck me when I was working through this work plan, in 2024, there was just an uncanny amount of periodic items coalescing. So you're doing your comp plan, which was delayed by the fire. We hadn't planned on doing it in 2024, but it started in 2024 with a really big effort. You're doing your 2-year budget. We're doing our 4-year resident survey. We're doing our 5-year waste contract. All of these things are happening in 1 year. That's a huge year. It's a lot. So you've got 6 complete items in your ongoing. 9 are in progress, and some of these are multi-year things. The Comfest franchise renewal has started. It's going to continue into 25. You're going to do your appointee evaluation. It's continuing in January. Partnerships, PUDs, consent items, strategic planning, and unanticipated issues. I feel like I kind of laughed to myself when you had unanticipated issues on your work plan to start with. It's like, okay, this is a council that's aware that things come up, but we truly had a lot in 2024 to think through. You've got one that I put in another category here, the Rocky Mountain Municipal Airport Community Noise Roundtable. It's a lot of words for those letters. Was disbanded this year, though council has still worked on airport mitigation in other ways. With that, I wanted to give you a high-level overview. I'll be happy to take any questions, but I also want to thank everyone and just take a moment. We have a highly, highly engaged community who is also supportive and part of the reason that we get to do so many impressive things. I want to thank council for all of your leadership, your guidance, and your support, and I really want to thank staff. None of this happens in a vacuum. Without all of our staff working together, none of this could be accomplished.
Are there any questions for our city manager? Thank you for taking us through all of that. Some of those I had forgotten, I must say, and others. I think you've and staff have done a wonderful job. I think council has done a wonderful job about pushing. There were a lot of meetings this year. I'm kind of hopeful that we won't need as many executive sessions next year. I'm hopeful that we get a new city manager next year and that we have a good work plan discussion. But thank you very much. You and Meredith both have had to slip into new shoes, and so our clerk as well. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, you can sit, it's fine. Yeah, no, it is, I'm excited for 2025. We obviously have nothing to do since we did all that in 2024. But no, it is amazing when we talk about that kind of crazy time to have a 4-year thing, land on a 2-year thing, land on a 5-year thing, land on a 10-year thing. And some of that not really premeditated because they weren't when they would normally be due to delays with whether COVID or Marshall Fire. So it is remarkable to have those things all hit with a lot of other issues there. And I think, Chris Mayer alluded to it, but it's a huge thing that you have stepped into and that your whole team has stepped up into. Losing the head of an organization, the city manager, in the middle of the year, and you guys are trucking right along. Your departments are just fantastic. Your department heads are fantastic. You guys have done a great job of really, in a lot of ways for me, I feel like we didn't skip a beat, which is kind of ridiculous to say. I mean, of course we did. Of course we struggled in some moments, but it's amazing the team that you all have assembled and the leadership that we're seeing from all of you. So, thank you for all that work. We come here, on Tuesday nights. There's some other stuff, but you guys do the lion's share of the work, and we all get that. We know how much more you do than we do. So yeah, thank you so much for a really, it's good. I mean, I don't think we've ever quite had that presentation of just like, hey, remember, these are all the things we did this year. And like the mayor said, I forgot a couple of like those, no, that was years ago. I don't know what you're talking about. That was so long ago. You're right. Like, oh my God, that was all this year. And it's really good to see that and take a step back for a second. And be like, no, we did. We accomplished a lot as an organization. And of course, we're part of that. And the community is part of that. And all your staff is part of that. So thank you for all that great work.
Yes, Councilmember Hamilton.
Two things. First, I don't know if there's plans to somehow share this beautiful summary or some version of it with the community. And secondly, Sam, I'd like to thank you for your leadership throughout all of those transitions. Without you guiding us along the way, I'm not certain we would have had all of those items to brag about. So I'd like to specifically thank you and call you out for that.
All right. Councilmember Cooperman.
Just briefly, since I'm only recently on council, I just want to thank my fellow council members and also former council member Bierman, but especially city staff for all the work they've done over the last year. And I'm looking forward to next year working with everyone.
Thanks. City Attorney's report. That's how we shorten the meeting. You just take microphones away from people. All right. Identification of future agenda items. Any thoughts about that for now? Talk about after. Yeah. I think motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thanks. We're adjourned.